Growing up, our family home carried a unique history. It used to be a funeral home, standing tall for over a century. And let me tell you, I'm pretty sure it's haunted. Whenever I came back from college on breaks, especially during Christmas, strange things would happen. One of the creepiest experiences was when I had sleep paralysis. I'd wake up unable to move, my eyes fixed on a pale figure of a girl with a dark headband standing beside my bed. She always faced the window, so her face remained hidden in the shadows. It sent shivers down my spine every time. But it wasn't just me who sensed something eerie in that old house. My dog, faithful companion that he was, would sleep beside me and then suddenly wake up in the dead of night, barking furiously at a dark corner of my room. It was like he could see something I couldn't, something lurking in the shadows. After one particularly terrifying episode of sleep paralysis, I couldn't bear to spend another night alone in my room. I ended up seeking refuge in my mom's bed for the remainder of that Christmas break, clinging to her presence for a sense of safety in the face of the unknown. To this day, the memories of those haunting experiences linger, casting a shadow over the nostalgia of coming home. Our family home may be filled with history, but it's also filled with secrets, whispering tales of the supernatural that continue to send chills down my spine. When I was younger, my two siblings and I would spend summer weekends away at my cousin's house. Their house was in this region that was pretty isolated and full of farmlands. I remember one day when I was maybe 8 or 9, it was particularly hot. Their house didn't have AC. While the temperatures cooled down at night, it was still uncomfortable. I was sleeping in my older cousin's room with my little sister, and I woke up in the middle of the night because it was too stuffy. I decided to go sleep out in the living room because I had remembered that my aunt opened the windows and sliding glass door, so there was at least a breeze and circulation. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I remember waking up what seemed like seconds later. Before I opened my eyes, I had a feeling that someone was watching me. I was facing the couch, and when I finally opened my eyes, I saw a little girl sitting across from me. She wore a dress that looked like it was from the 1890s and was brushing her long, wavy hair. She was a bit transparent, but had a gold tint because of the streetlight that was shining in on her. I blinked and she put down her brush in her lap, smiled at me, did a little wave and mouthed, "Hello." I immediately shut my eyes, shot up, and ran back to my cousin's room. I remember only being able to fall asleep because I convinced myself that it didn't happen. When it was morning, I was the last to wake up. I walked into the kitchen where everyone was already eating breakfast. My older brother was in the middle of telling a story. Apparently, he had woken up in the middle of the night, too. He had also gone to the living room and was woken up by the feeling that someone else was there, too. He saw the same little girl and ran away just like I had. I freaked out and told him about my identical experience. I grew up in a very old home in rural Wisconsin. It was over 100 years old when we moved in, and the original structure was added onto throughout the years before we moved in. It was originally a one-room house. When I was little, my brother Dylan and I would always see and hear weird things. As an adult, we remember them vividly, but when we were kids, we'd brush it off, and our parents would say we were imagining things. One time, Dylan went up to our mom's room to grab something for her and turned around to see a little boy standing in the doorway of our shared room. The right side was always particularly creepy, and it was a renovated attic. And when I was a kid, in that same room, I would see my Barbies moving on the top of my flat dollhouse. My mom had friends stay over one night, and one stayed on our couch. He woke up in the middle of the night to someone choking him and was like, "There's something here, and I need to leave," and bolted. The real clincher is that when I was in high school, we had to get a new septic tank, and my parents couldn't find it anywhere because the records were awful, so they ended up getting a hold of the son of the original owners. He was 1,000,000 years old, and he told my parents where the tank was because he helped dig it out. My mom was like, "I have to ask, we've had some creepy stuff happen here, but whatever it is, it seems to like our family." She asked if the place was haunted, and according to my mom, when she asked him, his face turned white and blank. It was because his brother hung himself as a teenager in our living room. I'm Norwegian, so I understood what he was saying, especially bus accident. He kept pointing down to the Esso station. I woke up, it was October 31st, convinced a bus was going to crash into the station. I told my mom and dad everything about the dream, and my dad told me to get a grip. Nightmares happen. That didn't stop my high anxiety. Every bus that stopped to deliver packages I was sure would crash. Nothing happened. But that evening, my siblings and I went down to the station to buy snacks for a horror movie marathon, and I saw a newspaper headline, "Bus Accident in Tenerife." It had a picture of a bus in front of a Shell gas station. Naturally, I bought it because it was a Swedish tourist bus that went off the road in Tenerife, not too far from the airport there, with 28 people on board. A Norwegian tourist leader died. Front and center in the article was a picture of two blonde boys crying in the aftermath of the accident. One of them was young, aged 8 or 9, in a striped t-shirt with a star print in the middle. He survived. I don't believe in psychics, mediums, witches, or anything paranormal, but I still have the paper to remind myself I don't know anything. How can a little boy appear in a dream of mine, a stranger, to warn of an accident happening as it was happening on October 30th, 2005? I haven't had anything like that ever happen to me again. I still can't explain it. I lived in a spooky dorm my freshman year of college. It was built on the site of the Confederate cannon line from the major Civil War battle that took place in our town, so it was bound to have some bad omens around. We had several things happen to us. For instance, my friends lived in the room next door. Nightly, their door would fly open. It did not matter if it was deadbolted. The door would fly open anyway. My friend would run into the hallway, but there was never anyone there. One evening, as I sat alone on my bed watching TV, a box just shot out from under my bed, all on its own. Nobody was around, as it was a Friday night and everyone had gone to dinner. Perhaps the strangest was one weekend when things went from spooky to downright scary. My friends next door were both going out of town. I knew this, but as I sat at my desk, there was knocking coming through the wall. I thought they were still there, so I played along and knocked back a few times. Each time I was met with more knocks. When I texted them about it, they were both confused. They'd already left campus, and no one was in their room. Little did my parents know when they purchased their 1911 dream home, their second-born would be best friends with the little girl in the attic. Ever since I can remember, I've known things I shouldn't be able to and have seen things that weren't technically there. As a young child, my parents played these things off as my imaginary friends. Time went on, I grew up, but my imaginary friends never went away. One friend in particular stayed close to me for a long time. She began peering in my doorway at age 3, and she aged alongside me. Years after the little girl first appeared, my family and I were cleaning out our basement. Above the exposed rafters, my brother uncovered a stack of old photographs. On top of this pile of dusty images was my imaginary best friend, and beside her face was a name, Jane. Jane would come into my room almost nightly. She would walk down the attic steps, stare at me through my doorway, and enter my room, sometimes playing with my things, but always praying at the foot of my bed. Jane would finish her nightly visit by walking down the stairs to the family living area. When our alarm was set, she would set the motion sensors off. Still, my parents never believed me. They said it was dust. I spent the next few years sleeping with my lights on so Jane wouldn't startle me so much, and soon, as I aged, I began to see her less and less. At 15, I stopped seeing her altogether. She became more of a feeling, or a voice I would hear at times of struggle, a spirit I credit with saving my life more than once. After finding her photograph, it became my most prized possession, and I stored it in a china cabinet in our kitchen. It wasn't the most secure location. One afternoon when I was 15, our kitchen had a fire and the stack of pictures burned. In adulthood, I started stretching my psychic muscles and seeing things again, which reassured me the whole thing wasn't just my imagination and made me long for Jane, who I'd last seen 20 years ago. I began to want to know if I could prove through documentation that she was really a natural person who died in childhood. Thankfully, with time, genealogical websites became very proficient, and I researched my house and the families who've lived there. Then, in an obituary in a 1918 newspaper, I found her. Jane Hill Patrick was born on July 19, 1903, and died on July 24, 1918 of rheumatic fever. She died in my home. The address was listed in her obituary because her wake was held in our house. She died at 15, the same age I was when I stopped seeing her and when the picture burned. Thankfully, through my research, I've located her brother's child. Her now 90-year-old nephew had only ever heard stories of his aunt. However, he did have a photograph. He graciously shared with me the only known remaining image of her. The face I saw was unmistakable. It was my earliest friend and my favorite spirit, Jane.